Imagine a place where doctors, instead of healing, turned into agents of unimaginable cruelty. A facility where life was dissected without mercy, and suffering was inflicted in the name of science. This was Unit Dia. 31. Japan's darkest secret. Hidden for decades and a chilling reminder of humanity's capacity for horror. Before we begin, I invite you to stay with me till the end of this video. What you are about to hear is disturbing, but remembering these truths honors the victims and ensures history is never repeated. If you find this valuable, please subscribe and share so awareness lives on. The early 20th century was a time of turbulence in Asia. Japan, rising as a formidable empire, sought to expand its reach into China. In 1931, the Japanese army invaded Manchuria, establishing a puppet state known as Manchukuo. Behind the scenes of military conquest, something far more sinister was quietly unfolding. At the heart of this hidden darkness was Unit 731, officially called the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army. On paper, it sounded like a health and sanitation branch, supposedly protecting soldiers from disease and contamination. In reality, it was a biological and chemical warfare research facility, designed to develop the most terrifying weapons imaginable, under the command of General Shiro Ishii, a brilliant but twisted microbiologist. Unit 731 operated with absolute secrecy. Located near the city of Harbin, the facility was vast, a self-contained town with laboratories, barracks, and prisons. It could house up to 3,000 personnel at a time, including doctors, scientists, and soldiers. But the most chilling fact was not its size. It was its purpose: to use living humans as experimental material. These captives, men, women, even children, were referred to as maruta, meaning logs, a dehumanizing term, as though they were nothing more than firewood to be consumed. And so, behind high walls and barbed wire, under the guise of scientific progress, some of the most inhumane atrocities in modern history took place. The victims of Unit 731 came from many walks of life. Most were Chinese civilians and prisoners of war. But the victims also included Russians, Koreans, Mongolians, and even a few Allied prisoners captured during World War II. Estimates suggest that around 12,000 people were killed directly within Unit 731. If we include the wider biological warfare campaigns across China, the death toll climbs into the hundreds of thousands. Many of the victims were ordinary villagers, falsely accused of being spies or rebels. Some were taken during military sweeps, their families never knowing what became of them. Mothers were separated from their children. Whole groups vanished into the fortress of Unit 731, never to return. The prisoners were stripped not only of their freedom, but also of their dignity. They were locked into cells, often starved or exposed to harsh conditions before being experimented upon. The guards and scientists referred to them casually as logs, an attempt to erase any human connection and silence any moral hesitation. This dehumanization is important to understand. By reducing victims to objects, the perpetrators justified acts that otherwise would have been unthinkable. It became easier to cut, infect, poison, and ultimately kill when the victims were no longer seen as human beings. For many survivors and families, the pain was not only physical but deeply emotional. To this day, descendants of the victims continue to struggle for recognition, memorials, and justice. The tragedy was not only the brutality of the acts, but also the decades of silence that followed. This brings us to the experiments themselves, shocking examples of how far humanity can fall when morality is abandoned. One of the most infamous atrocities involved vivisection, the surgical cutting open of living human beings. Victims were tied down and their organs were removed one by one. The purpose? To study how diseases affected the body in real time. Anesthesia was deliberately withheld, because Ishii's team believed drugs might interfere with pure results. Men, women, even pregnant mothers were subjected to this unimaginable cruelty. In some cases, babies were delivered and dissected as well. Unit 731's central mission was to develop biological weapons. Victims were deliberately infected with deadly pathogens such as plague, anthrax, cholera, smallpox, and typhoid. Scientists wanted to observe the natural progression of these diseases, so victims were denied treatment and left to die slowly. While their suffering was recorded in meticulous detail, plague-infected fleas were bred in mass quantities. These fleas were later released into Chinese villages, causing outbreaks that killed tens of thousands. In one infamous series of experiments, prisoners were exposed to sub-zero temperatures until their limbs froze solid. The frozen flesh would then be struck with sticks until it emitted a sound like wood breaking. Doctors studied the effects of frostbite, amputating limbs and sometimes reattaching them in unnatural ways. These tests aimed to prepare Japanese soldiers for winter warfare, but the cost was thousands of innocent lives. Prisoners were also used as human targets for grenades, flamethrowers, and chemical weapons. Entire groups were locked in gas chambers and exposed to mustard gas, cyanide, and other poisons. Scientists observed the reactions and timed how long it took for the victims to die. Women were subjected to horrific sexual experiments, including forced pregnancies. Researchers wanted to study disease transmission from mother to child. Infected men were made to assault women, and pregnancies were allowed to progress until late stages before vivisection was performed on both mother and fetus. These acts combined cruelty, pseudoscience, and a total disregard for humanity. The horrors of Unit 731 did not remain confined within its walls. The Japanese military used biological warfare across China, deploying plague-infected fleas and contaminating rivers with cholera and typhoid. Entire villages were wiped out. Outbreaks spread uncontrollably, killing farmers, families, and even livestock. Historians estimate that over 200,000 people across China may have died from these deliberate biological attacks. The cruelty lay not only in the numbers but also in the strategy. These experiments were not designed merely for data collection. They were part of a vision to weaponize disease as a tool of war. In Ishii's mind, germs were cheaper than bullets, and invisible armies of microbes could cripple entire populations. For those who survived, the aftermath was devastating. Scarred bodies, destroyed communities, and an enduring fear of disease. For decades, these victims' voices were silenced by politics and denial. When World War II ended in 1945, the truth about Unit 731 could have come to light, but instead secrecy shrouded the atrocities for decades. The reason was geopolitical. The United States, entering the Cold War against the Soviet Union, saw potential value in the data collected by Ishii and his team. Instead of prosecuting them as war criminals, many Unit 731 scientists were granted immunity in exchange for handing over their research. Shiro Ishii himself lived freely after the war, never facing trial. Many of his colleagues went on to hold prominent positions in Japanese universities, hospitals, and pharmaceutical companies, while some lower-ranking personnel were tried by the Soviets in 1949. The full scale of Unit 731's crimes remained hidden from the public eye. For survivors and families, this silence was salt in the wound. The lack of accountability denied them justice, while the perpetrators lived comfortable lives. Only decades later, as documents emerged and testimonies surfaced, did the world begin to grasp the full extent of what happened. Today, Unit 731 stands as a scar on human history. The victims, men, women, and children, had no voice, no choice, and no mercy. Their stories remind us of the dangers of unchecked power, blind obedience, and science divorced from ethics. In Harbin, the former site of Unit 731 has been transformed into a museum. Visitors walk through the preserved buildings, seeing the instruments of torture, the cells, and the haunting remnants of experiments. It is not a place of spectacle, but of mourning and remembrance. The survivors who spoke out in their old age gave faces and voices to the nameless logs. Their testimonies carry weight because they chose courage over silence. Through their memories, the victims live on in history. As we reflect on these tragedies, we are called not only to remember but also to learn. Medicine and science at their best heal and uplift humanity. At their worst, when stripped of morality, they can become weapons of unimaginable cruelty. Unit 731 is not just a story of the past. It is a warning for the present and the future. In a world where advanced technology, artificial intelligence, and genetic engineering are rapidly progressing, we must remember that ethics must guide science. The lesson is clear. Knowledge without compassion can destroy. Progress without humanity can lead us back into the darkness. By keeping the memory of Unit 731 alive, we strengthen our collective conscience. We honor the victims not by turning away in horror, but by facing the truth and ensuring that science serves life, never death. Unit 731 represents one of history's darkest chapters. Its silence lasted too long, but memory must endure. May we honor the victims by ensuring that compassion always guides knowledge, and that such cruelty is never repeated. Let us remember, and let us never allow forgetting.